Imagine a village. Summer is coming to an end, the field is emptying, the storehouse is filling, everyone knows that winter is coming. But no one knows exactly how long it will be, how harsh it will be, how long it will last. This uncertainty was not simply a question of weather, it is an economic question that determines the distance between life and death. In that village, the greatest financial problem of every family was not a bank loan, not an interest rate, not an investment. The greatest financial problem was this: will the food last until winter ends? This question was humanity's fundamental economic question for millennia. And the first answer to this question came not from an accounting ledger, but from dried meat, dried fruit, and salted fish. Dried food was not simply a method of storage, it was the first financial instrument for managing the future. The problem of preserving food is humanity's most ancient problem. An animal was hunted, its meat spoils tomorrow. The field was harvested, the grain rots in the rain. Nature gave abundance, but that abundance was short-lived. The future, however, was long, uncertain, and demanding. Drying was the first defense against this uncertainty. Meat dried in the sun could be eaten for months. Salted fish could reach a mountain village far from the sea. Dried fruit gave the taste of summer in the middle of winter. With this simple technique, for the first time, a person was able to transfer today's abundance into the future. Transferring into the future. The economic meaning within this sentence is great, because this is the most primitive form of capital accumulation. Economists explain capital accumulation with complex concepts, but the essence is this: preserving today's surplus for tomorrow's need. Dried food did this in the form of nourishment. In ancient Egypt, this principle became a state financial system. The pharaoh's storehouses were filled with dried grain. When a bad year came, when the flood was low, when the Nile did not rise on time, the storehouses were opened. This system was not simply humanitarian aid, it was the preservation of the state budget in the form of food. This system stood behind Egypt's ability to build a great civilization along the Nile. Food stored in the warehouse meant economic stability. Stability meant planning. And planning meant large construction projects, long-term investment, and the coordination of complex human labor. The story of Joseph in Egypt, 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine, is not only a religious text, it is the oldest written description of economic risk management through food reserves. Save the surplus in years of abundance, distribute it in years of famine. This logic underlies every budget system today, every reserve fund, every insurance mechanism. In Mesopotamia, grain storehouses played the same role, but in a more complex financial form. The storehouses were not simply places of storage, they functioned as the first banks. Grain was deposited, a document was issued, and that document was used in trade. Dried grain was the physical foundation for an abstract financial instrument. This grain banking system made something very important possible. A merchant could place his grain in the storehouse, take a document, travel to a distant city, and give that document to another merchant. The grain did not move, but the economic power of the grain did. This was one of the earliest examples of capital being separated from its physical form. The technique of salting expanded the geography of trade. Salted fish could reach from Norway to the Mediterranean. Salted meat could cross mountain passes. This possibility opened new trade routes. Distance was now determined not by spoiling food, but by transportation cost. Long-distance trade, however, required financial instruments. When salted fish traveled from Norway to Florence, it changed hands several times. Each change of hands was a payment. Each payment was a risk. To manage these risks, a credit system, an insurance mechanism, and a legal framework were needed. The trade in dried food gave a direct impetus to the birth of these institutions. In the Middle Ages, monasteries brought the art of food preservation to its highest level. Monks applied drying, salting, pickling, and fermentation, all methods systematically. The monastery's storehouse was not only a source of food, it was a source of economic power. When a monastery opened its storehouse during a great famine, it became the only refuge for the surrounding villages. This power gave monasteries spiritual, economic, and political authority alike. Storing dried food, this simple activity, was the primary factor shaping power relations in medieval Europe. Trading cities used food reserves as a strategic weapon. Venice gained great economic power through its control over the salted fish trade. The city that kept salt extraction sites, salting warehouses, and distribution routes under its control kept everything under its control, because without salted food, long-distance trade was impossible. Seafaring made this connection even clearer. The main problem of a long sea voyage was food: dried meat, hardtack, salted fish. Without these, a ship could not venture into the open ocean. The discovery of new trade routes in fact ran parallel to the discovery of food preservation technology. Columbus's 1492 voyage was not only an act of navigational courage, it was also a problem of food logistics. How much dried food must be taken? How far can they travel? Can they return? These calculations were both a maritime and a financial question. The discovery of the New World arose from an adventure conditioned by food preservation technique. The Industrial Revolution took the matter of food preservation to a different level. Cities grew, the rural population decreased, and the distance between food production and consumption widened. The urban worker could not preserve their own food. Food was now purchased from the market. This change sharply expanded the food trade. The volatility of food prices brought new financial risks onto the agenda. When grain became expensive, factory workers went hungry. This risk meant social tension. Governments created food reserves, state warehouses, strategic grain funds. Dried food once again became an instrument of state finance, but this time in the context of an industrial economy. Today, futures markets determine food prices months in advance. Wheat, corn, soybeans, the future price of all of these is sold and bought today. This mechanism is fundamentally based on the same logic as the ancient warehouse system: managing the uncertainty of the future, distributing risk, transferring abundance to the period of scarcity. Dried food stands modestly in the corner of today's modern food industry, but the chain it set in motion, reserve, planning, risk management, capital accumulation, shaped the most fundamental concepts of finance. The first financiers were not calculating profit. They were simply trying to store enough food to get through the winter. Looking at today's culture of waste, at the things we do not use because they do not seem cost-effective, what would that ancient villager think? If preserving food was the first financial planning, what do you consider your most powerful reserve against the uncertainty of the future today? If these kinds of questions are the sort that make you turn things over and over in your mind, how simple techniques gave birth to great economic systems, how everyday life stands at the root of financial history. This channel is made for exactly that. Subscribe, and every week we go a little more deeply into the stories that shape the world you live in today. If there is a moment in financial history that has always interested you, write it in the comments. The next video can begin from exactly where your question ends.